Welcome to Surrounded by Sports, the podcast. Today, our guest is Brian Lester of the Navarre Press. Brian, how are you doing?
Hey, not too bad, KP. How you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm good. I call Brian B-Rye. What was it? A couple of football media days ago, right? We met over at Wahoo Stadium. You were.
Yeah,
It was us. It was Do Works. Over in the other corner was the guy who does Florida high school football altogether. He had like a huge setup, right?
yeah.
Mike
Yep.
Valarezo, my guy, Mike Valarezo was there. I think that's when we. I think we have talked or interacted somewhere around 95% of the days since then on Twitter or X in some way or another.
Yeah.
Five conversations.
What's that?
We've had about five conversations in that time period, but we have
Yeah,
commented or messaged each other just about every day since then, right?
very true. Yep, accurate. That's accurate.
All right. Yeah. Today we will talk to Brian about local sports coverage. Brian works for the Navarre Press, and he also works for the Santa Rosa Press Gazette. And I think that the importance of what Brian does for his community, for the with the way how do I put it? With the way that media is changing, outlets like yours become more and more important because the news journals, the WEARs, they have less and less people to cover such grand ground. And so it makes Gulf Breeze News, it makes North Escambia County, it makes the Navarre Press, the Santa Rosa Gazette vital for people to understand not only sports, but also just news in general. But you cover sports and we talk about sports. So that's why I felt the need to get you on the show. I hope to talk to you about a little bit of that, about your influence on your community in the way that you just interview kids, talk to kids, make things, get them more and more comfortable in dealing with press because that's in a weird way practice for a job interview. And also about your journey to Navarre, Florida from Illinois. We want to do all that and more after this. Does that sound good?
Sounds good, man.
All right, man. All right. All right, Brian. First of all, let's talk about special relationships. If it's okay, can we talk about Quentin Randolph first?
Like Quentin, obviously everyone knows, at least around here, that Quentin Randolph played on UWF's national championship team in 2019. Now he's playing pro ball out in Vegas, in the indoor football league for the Nighthawks. He's a pretty good receiver. And Vegas fits him because he's a flashy, likes to be in the spotlight kind of guy. He's also cool and humble, but he loves to be in the spotlight. So Vegas fits him. But I met him because I came to Navarre like in the spring of 2015. So I met Q that during spring football. He was just hanging out because he was graduating that May, so he was just hanging out. He wasn't playing football, and obviously he walked on to UWF, so I kept up with his career there. And he didn't play much the first couple of years, but I was still like talking to him, writing some stories on him just because. And Q finally got his breakout moment in 17 and 18 a little bit, and then 19 obviously he just took off and was a big part of that UWF national championship. And I went out to Vegas a couple of years ago and talked to Q and did a story on him and saw him play. But yeah, I mean Q, he he always thanks me for the part I played in his success and just helping him get to where he's at. Obviously he did all the work. I mean, he's the guy. I mean, so but I always appreciate him, and we stay in touch, and it's kind of cool, to have that because no one's really paying attention to Quentin Randolph in his first couple of years at UWF except me.
Right.
And I always knew he had it in him to be that kind of guy, a big time player, and he finally got that chance to be that guy. And everyone else was surprised, but I never was when Quentin took off and became who he became at UWF and then beyond.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool to still have that relationship, though, for sure.
Right. And you get the opportunity to kind of build those relationships through your job all the time.
Oh
Right.
yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. I with coaches or athletes or you know, I mean, I even had the some of the Milton student section chant my name at a game before, which is kind of weird because I'm
Yeah.
not doing the work out there on the court, like those basketball players, but it's always cool to see that, that kids get excited to see me around or whatever. And, and, and so, I don't like to brag about myself. I
Right.
mean,
Of course not.
but it's kind of cool. And I guess at the same time, you kind of feel like a responsibility, like hold a high standard because, people expect a lot out of you and they think, they appreciate what you do work wise. So I always try to keep that in mind of like, what I do does matter, in some way. And, so I try to keep that in mind and just try to have a high standard for myself and do the most I can. I can't be everywhere, but I try to do the best I can with, the time I have.
Well, that you're great at it, first of all. And the kids get I do a lot of the press days. And so I get to interview these kids in like sit down scenarios. And when I interview anybody from Santa Rosa County, I will bring you up, and they always say how thankful they are to have somebody that pays that much attention to what they're doing. And it gives them the opportunity to, like we said before, the job interviews, the scenarios where you have to public speak, that kind of thing starts for them, a lot of those kids, a little bit in school, but also the random interview after a game, the random interview going into a big series,
Yeah.
these things allow them to practice all those skills that they're going to need outside of sports. Every now and then a Quentin happens and he interviews with the Las Vegas paper or whatever, but that's not the majority. The majority of the kids need to be able to speak when spoken to in public settings for various reasons. And you allow them to begin to do that, right? Now, the other great thing about you is you cover so much. How many sports are you covering right now?
Man, in the spring, I mean, boy, it's, between all the teams, I mean, probably, 10, 15, teams, because obviously in the spring, there's baseball, softball, and there's boys and girls lacrosse, flag football, track obviously is a big deal. And,
Weightlifting?
just in weightlifting, yeah, going to state this weekend in Lakeland, for weightlifting. So yeah, I mean, like there's a lot going on in the spring, and then plus at the same time, obviously spring football is coming up here in a couple weeks. And then you just got all the other random stuff on the side, like paying attention to what like college athletes are doing, or trying to come up with ideas for stories for like the summertime, when teams are not playing.
Right, right.
So things like that. But yeah, it stays busy in the summer. In the spring, I'd say but it's probably the busiest just because you're trying to get so many games into like a kind of a short amount of time in the
Right.
spring. Just but
I was trying to think, how
so
many articles did you write like in a week? Because I
well,
scrolled through the Gazette, right, I saw at least six for like day before yesterday or something.
yeah, I'd say between like as far as just like print goes, between Navarre Press and Press Gazette, I would say like, you know, 16 to 18 stories probably a week, because like you have to, like the hard thing about like what I do is, you gotta like what goes in Navarre Press can't always go in the Press Gazette. Like it has
Right,
to be like it's a whole different audience.
right,
So like you just can't be like, well, if this story can go in both papers because they always can't because you have two different audiences.
right,
Obviously, North End and Santa Rosa, they care about other things that the South End doesn't.
right.
But so yeah, and then plus, I'll put some random stories online. So probably 3 or 4 extra stories a week, just that go online only, because it's something that happens, breaking or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, I do a lot of writing. I don't always think about how much I've actually written in a
Right.
week until like afterwards, but yeah, it's a lot, but
Right. Well, and okay, let's go into this. Your last Brian Out Loud. I think it was your last Brian Out Loud, where you talked about, hey, enjoy these last couple of weeks because school's
yeah,
wrapping up right now.
yep,
Um, I thought that was eloquent. I thought it was spot on. I think that sometimes people can get wrapped up in the results, and like here on this show, we try to it. Look, I'm always going to have room for somebody that wants something, right?
yeah.
As will everybody else. But the important thing is that we let people understand that what they're learning at the high school level is going to help them through life, but also the experiences one shares, win a state title or not. Talk about what you wrote.
Yeah, so that column, I mean, obviously, I, 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 I was trying to come up with that idea, and that just came to mind, because like you said, the season's winding down. There's only like a little over a month until graduation. And obviously for the high school season itself, I mean, eh, only maybe 1 or 2 teams are going to be lucky enough to go play a state, and even then, that's only like 9 more weeks of your season. So like for
Right,
most teams, they're done. Like the next few weeks, they're done. Like
right,
and for the seniors, that's it. Like unless you might go on to college and play, obviously, but for your high school career, it's over. Like
right,
you're
right,
not you're not you're not around your team anymore every day. You're not going to practice. You're not going to games. You're not riding the bus, whatever. So it's like and I think, like you said, people get caught up sometimes in the winning and what your record is. Even if it's not a great record, you're frustrated, but like you kind of just got to enjoy it because your practices, your games, your time in the dugout, around the bench, whatever. Because you know it's it's going to be over fast,
right,
like
right,
and then you look back and you're like, wow, that was a pretty good time, that I had. But so like you got to take time to like enjoy that a little bit because it goes faster than you think, and obviously for a high school kid, it's hard to, to put that into their mind that it
right,
goes fast,
right,
but but it definitely does. And so I
right,
just kind of wrote about that and how just enjoy that time because man, it goes quick.
right, right. Now, does that? I think this is a good spot. Like, your high school experience, it feels to me like your high school experience must have been good. Because
Yeah,
to,
I mean,
to
I had a
me,
pretty
that's
good.
the genesis of this article.
Yeah, I mean, I had a good high school experience. I mean, like obviously, I'm sure in my mind too, like a kid, I at that time, you don't you don't think about like
Yeah,
you don't think about how quick it really goes,
right,
but when you have a chance to look back 15 years later and you know, you're like, dang, that went pretty fast,
right.
like
Now, what town?
that.
What town in Illinois are you from?
So I'm from Rockford, which is Northwest Illinois. It's where Fred Van Fleet's from.
Oh,
He's he, he
yeah,
he yeah, he's the first dude to make it out of the city and make it to the NBA. He played in the Final Four, obviously, at Wichita State. So, he kind of became like that dude for the other kids to kind of be inspired by because, Van Fleet. Because I mean, Rockford had good high school basketball.
right,
Like being from up there, like sometimes I wish like the crowds were more like that, like
right,
they were up there,
mm-hmm,
because like gyms were packed on a Friday night.
right,
Like it was it was a big time event on a Friday night, and every team had ballers. Like
right,
every single team had a baller, and like like you got good basketball around here, but I wish
mm-hmm,
it was like more appreciated than it
right.
is.
Yeah.
But
Well, you know what? Washington High School with Brown, with Coach Brown,
yep,
um, they had that vibe late in the year, right? They always
yeah,
have a good crowd, but they had that vibe late in the year. There were people coming that weren't just Booker T guys. There,
Yeah.
there were people coming just to watch because everybody's, oh, this is a really good team. Let's check this out.
Yeah.
Milton developed that over the course of the year,
Yep.
right? And when
Yep.
you went, the last Milton game I went to, I think it was their last home game. It was fanatic in there. That that wasn't the famous Brian Lester chant, but still, it
Yeah.
was great in there. It was great. Now,
Yeah.
when did you know you were going to be a writer?
Um, you know, it's funny. I didn't write in high school, like for the paper or anything. I mean, I was good at writing, itself. Like English was always easy and writing reports was easy, but and actually, I almost failed typing in sophomore year. So, so like, but I wish I could go back now and show my
Yeah.
teacher that. But I mean, I think like in college, when I got to college, like I started writing with the student paper. Um, and then I got on with the school paper, or like, I got on with the school paper and started writing and just kind of stuck with it. And from there, yeah, I mean, that was kind of where it all started. And uh,
Now,
I stuck with.
college was Eastern Illinois.
Yeah, I went to junior college for a couple years, and then I went to Eastern Illinois. And both places I wrote at the student paper, though. And yeah, it was a good experience. I mean, like, because it was all student, run media, so you kind of like learned a lot because you did interviews and wrote your stories and edited and all that. So you learned a lot like about being a professional while in college, and it was definitely a great experience doing that.
Right. Right. So did
So
you have Eastern Illinois now? Did you ever meet Kevin Duckworth?
I did not meet Kevin Duckworth, but obviously they had some stuff up in the gym about him. He was obviously a great player at Eastern Illinois and played in
Right.
the NBA.
Right.
Um,
But
yeah, I don't know how many
lost in a
people.
final.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, no one. I don't know how many people know Kevin Duckworth went to Eastern Illinois, but yeah. I mean, he was definitely a big time player there, and
Right.
actually, the Purdue coach Matt Painter, he was an assistant coach when I was in college. He was a assistant coach at Eastern Illinois at the time.
Right.
So, and obviously now he's at Purdue, but yeah,
Yeah.
there's been some, Tony Romo and Garoppolo were both from Eastern Illinois.
Right. Right. You
So
never got
there's
to
some.
did you ever get to gaze into their eyes?
No, because they both came afterwards,
Right,
but
right, 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 right,
yeah,
right. Yeah,
but they,
dude, good ball players.
yeah, yeah. I
That,
mean, it worked out for both of them,
right,
So
right. Now, what happened? Like, here's a question. As you're a writer and you're in that area, did were you writing about sports already?
Eastern Illinois.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was writing sports. Yeah, I was covering different teams on campus. So
Did Sports Illustrated influence you? Did the Chicago Tribune influence you? They had to be pumping out articles about Jordan and Sosa and all that at the time.
yeah, definitely the Chicago papers, like the Sun Times and Tribune. I always read those papers. I mean, like during the Bulls, like glory years, and even before, like when the Bulls were kind of starting to come up to become what they became. I mean, I was like reading stories in the columns, and I was cutting out, pictures from the paper and hanging up in
Right.
my room
Mm-hmm.
as a kid.
Well,
So
Jordan.
yeah, and Sports Illustrated, I read that too. What's that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll say, well, Jordan. He broke through as a icon before he started winning. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
everybody was wearing Jordan shoes long before he was a champion, right? Somewhere
yeah,
around,
yeah,
I think the Olympics broke him through a little bit. The amateur Olympic version with him and Patrick and Mullen
yeah,
winning their first gold in
yeah,
L.A. But then he really becomes this iconic figure. Like, and I know that when we were growing up, you didn't have outlets dedicated to the Bulls like that, right? You WGN might be, but it
yeah,
wasn't like it is now. So you did have to go to the local paper to find that. Like when I was, because my family, my father's side of the family was from New York. I would read the Post and the Times to learn about the Knicks and the Mets and the Yankees and all that, right? Even
Yeah.
down here in Florida, because
Yep.
it wasn't as easy, right?
Yep. Oh
Yeah,
yeah, you had to like read the paper, and I would watch the games on WGN, or they had a sports channel in Chicago. So I'd watch that. But yeah, I read the paper. I mean, it's kind of cool. Like actually, one of the writers I used to read as a kid, um, in the Chicago paper, Fred Mitchell. He started following me on Twitter like probably a year ago. There's actually an award. There's actually an award he has for him for D3 football, because I guess he
hmm,
was a kicker, I believe, in
right.
D3. So he gives out an award every year to like one of the top players in D3 football. So which is kind of cool. But yeah, it was kind of cool to keep following me. Like I'm like, I used to read his stuff when he was writing about the Cubs and the White Sox and the
Right.
Bulls, and.
Did now
So it kind
you
of
have another job where you write about D3 hockey, right?
Yeah, I write like D3 hockey for one site, and I've been doing that probably 12 years now, I guess, just as a freelance gig. And then like D3 football and basketball, I've done that. I've done freelance for like the NCAA. I actually saw West Florida's. I was working for the NCAA, and I covered West Florida's national title in baseball when they won it in 2011. So I
Right.
was there. And it's kind of funny because, like, obviously at the time I didn't really know much about Pensacola because living in Ohio at the time. But DC Reeves is down there covering it for the PNJ. So I was like,
Right.
and obviously the future mayor of, but so it's kind of cool, like to look back at that and like, oh man, that was. But
Yeah, that's neat.
so kind of cool look back how that all connected. Like
Right. Right. So
so.
tell me this. Now you how did you wind up now the book you cover a perfect season. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, we can talk about that. That happened in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
The D2 basketball season. Finley, because I was in Ohio at the time working at Finley in their D2 university,
Mm-hmm.
and they were coming off like a they went to they went to the Sweet 16 the year before and got blown out by Grand Valley. And they came back that next year, and like I think everyone kind of knew they were gonna be the favorite to win it,
Mm-hmm.
and so they started the year number one in the country, um, and like so it was kind of cool, and they held it all year long, and like that's the season I always look back and I think back on. I mean, obviously I think back on like a lot of the cool highlights, but also just some of those tough games they had to win on the road during that process, and like you knew they were undefeated every time they played, but you didn't really think about it too much. Like they were putting together a perfect season,
Mm-hmm.
and then the NCAA tournament was just nuts because they won, like they won the Sweet 16 in overtime. They won the Elite Eight in overtime. They almost had to win the Final Four in overtime. And then they won the national title in overtime on a game-winning shot by a dude that he had started the year. Tyler Evans had started the year on as a starter. He was a senior, and like he got moved to the bench like 3 or 4 games in because there was just a better option. Like he just fit better coming off the bench. Like for him to accept that role, like to be a senior and like you're going to the bench for your senior year, and then he hit the game winning shot because the national player of the year had fouled out of the national championship game. So they went to him and he made the 3-pointer, and it was just nuts. I mean, because like to go 36-0, like is just, and I know personally I'll never see something like that again.
Right.
I mean, like, so I appreciate that fact, like that I was actually there in Massachusetts when they won it, and just to see them like do that, like it's kind of cool. And I remember the day before, like one of the biggest memories, like the day before the national championship, they had a day between the Final Four and the championship, and So, and Finley was playing the late game, so they in both the Elite Eight and Final Four, so they like had to. They were playing till like 11 o'clock at night, on the East Coast, and they probably didn't get out of the gym till like 11:30, midnight almost. So that Friday, when they got to the hotel for like their press conference or whatever, you could just see it, like you could just tell that they were tired. They were just ready for that season to be done. Like you could see that, like they were ready to get that weight off their shoulder, and like I mean, because it to to win all those games and be number one the whole time, everyone's coming at you and you're number one.
Right, right,
Everyone wants to knock you off and you're number one, and
right.
like so for them to win that championship and pull it off, I mean, like that was just insane, and it's still the coolest season. So I wrote a book about it. I mean, just because I mean I knew I'd never see something like that again, and
Right.
and obviously I haven't since, but it's
But that's what you do. You document.
yeah,
That's your
yeah,
life. Your life is
yep.
documenting the history, whether it be grand or whether it be small moments in time for kids and coaches and things like that. Let's take a break real quick. We'll come right back and we'll wrap. Sound good?
Sounds good, man.
All right. All right. Welcome back. I am here with Navarre Press and Santa Rosa Press Gazette sports writer Brian Lester. B-Rye. So quickly, since we are here with a guy that covers so much sports in Northwest Florida, you want to talk a little bit about what's going on currently in Northwest Florida sports?
Yeah, so I think one of the most notable things right now for me, I think, is just how good like baseball and softball have been, and like this area, at least the teams I cover, and I know beyond that too, there's some good teams, but like like Jay, the reigning champ in 1A, they're having another great year. I mean, Central's having a good year again. They just beat Jay the other night on a walk-off hit by pitch
Right. That was
to,
crazy.
to win that. That's nuts. I mean, and that meant a lot to Central because obviously them losing Jay being the state champ last year and Central getting bounced early in the regional. That meant a lot to them. So both teams are really good. And the craziest thing about Central and Jay right now in baseball is that for one of them to get the state, they're gonna have to beat the number one team, which is Holmes County. So like just to get the state, you're gonna have to beat the number one team
Right.
just to get to the Final Four, like which is crazy.
Yeah.
Even in Pace is in the same situation. Obviously, Pace is having another great year, and I know Tate's right there in that district too with them and hanging
Right.
around. But Pace will have to beat, or Tate, whoever, will have to beat the number one team in the state because Buchholz is number one right now in baseball in 6A. So, and then that 5A region that Milton plays in, I mean, you got Gulf Breeze, Niceville. That's
How
nuts.
how crazy is the year Gulf Breeze is having?
I know Gulf Breeze is like having an amazing year. I mean, they beat
Right.
Pace, I know, 4-0 like last week. I mean, they're having an
Beat Catholic
impressive year.
twice. Beat Catholic
Yeah.
twice. And they're looking up at Niceville.
Yeah. I mean, Niceville's number one, I think, right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Or they're close. They're right up there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like if you win that, whoever wins that region, like you earned it. I mean,
Well, what you
when you
just
come
what you
out of there.
just what you just said was this half of the state, whether it be Jacksonville or whatever, the number one team in the country's got to get not country, number one team in the state's got to get knocked off for you to get a shot.
Yep. Yeah. Which is crazy, which just shows you just how competitive, like,
Right.
this area is. Even in softball, I
Right.
mean, Milton and Pace and Navarre, and Jay. I mean, they're all good softball teams, and so it's pretty competitive right now. Like where you're not just playing like you don't have just. I mean, there's obviously always gonna be easy nights in high school. You're gonna have a team
Right.
you're just better than that team, but there's a lot of good games, and those districts and regionals should be a lot of fun to watch. I mean,
But
I know you're a Tate Aggie guy, and
right.
that's gonna be fun to see. I mean, just how because Pace and Tate, those two teams, they're
Right.
two of the best around,
Yeah,
and
Tate's beginning to get things rolling in the in the right direction, which I know a lot of people in I live in Cantonment in this area are starting to really get excited about, because the history is so strong there that you kind of feel like it's your birthright to be good when it's not. And that's the neat, dude. That's the neat thing about ebbs and flows in competition is people learn, right? Like
Yep.
as a guy who grew up with a dad that went to Florida State and a mom that went to Florida State, basically the whole family went there. Um, in 1993, 4, 5, 6, I thought it was always going to be like this. And then
Yeah.
when you start to lose some
Yep.
ball games, you start to realize, you know what? It ain't always going to be like this. There's so much
Yep.
that goes into being good at things. And the neat thing is, at our levels, you document these ebbs and flows. Now, switching gears to football, every coach is different.
Oh
It,
yeah.
it's crazy, right?
Yeah, I mean, every coach has their own, philosophy and how they do things, and the kind of plays they run, and the kind of culture they create, and I mean,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, there's been a lot of change, obviously, coming into this coming up season in 25. With Pace
Right.
having a new coach, Milton's got a new coach. Um,
Navarre?
well, Navarre, no, Navarre, well, Navarre's coach would be in his second year.
Yeah, right.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's
Wait, did Nicefield replace their
and
coach?
then Escambia County.
Did
Well,
Nicefield replace?
Niceville's getting a new coach too. They
Right.
haven't filled the spot yet, but they're getting a new coach.
He'll be good. I mean, Niceville doesn't
Yeah,
lose
I
much.
mean,
He's going to have to be good to
no,
take that job. And Pace, they're always great, and they're replacing a guy.
no,
I think Gulf Breeze's guy's in the second year. We go down to Catholic; they
no,
got a brand new coach, and they're a
new
powerhouse.
coach. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Pine
PHS has
Forest.
got a guy in the second year. Pine Forest got a brand new
Yep,
coach. This is a
yep,
it is a it, it's funny when the guy at Tate who's been there a couple of years is like the elder statesman. They've
yeah.
been together the longest and kind of have the things set in place the most. Brian, as we wrap this show, do you realize how important what you do is? I mean, you said you feel like you feel an obligation to do well, but guys like you, guys like Thompson, guys like what Ben does over at the News Journal, you can't uh, overestimate how important it is for parents to see positive things written about their children.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do like kind of. I always get reminders. It seems like of how important like what I do is to
Mm-hmm.
for the area kids. I mean, I've had kids come up to me that have graduated and they'll be like, I still have every article in my scrapbook that you wrote.
Right.
Like like she's like, they're like, sometimes I can't believe I said that in a story, but like,
Mm-hmm.
I still have those articles and just like when you cover a championship, I mean, like for Pace softball or J baseball last year,
Right.
I mean, they're keeping those papers like
Forever.
forever.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, even Finley's national championship paper, it's on a poster, it's in the trophy case.
Right.
Like, and that's staying there forever. I mean,
Right. That's
so
awesome.
yeah, so like those are reminders that like, yeah, I it's a reminder of what you do does matter,
People care.
yeah.
That's
So
that's what they should. See, I mean, when it's all said and done, right? Well, first of all, there is a beauty in the written word that I don't believe you can get in what I do or even with highlight packages, right? There's a majesty in the way things can be put on paper that you can't do because you can imagine in your head with it. It's the same thing when you're reading fiction, nonfiction, whatever, right? But also the transfer of history, the transfer of knowledge, uh, it happens through the stories we tell. And whether you realize it or not, you're a storyteller. And I appreciate you for giving us your time, brother.
yeah, well, I appreciate you too, KP. As always, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. And folks, thank you for watching. This has been a Surrounded by Sports show. That's Brian Lester. I'm Kevin Perkins. And look out for more of our episodes coming soon. Thank you very much.